Hello and welcome back to the Arcane Forge. My name's Josh, and today I want to do something a tiny bit different. I want to try and cover two separate kinds of topics at the same time. Firstly, when I started the channel, I really wanted to cover things that would help people get into the game if they've been interested in it and have never played it, or are just curious about parts of the game that they've not explored yet, a sort of introduction to D&D. And part of that was exploring what the individual classes in D&D actually do, how they play, what it's like to be one, and so on. So while this video goes on, I'm going to be exploring what it's like to be and how to play a wizard in Dungeons & Dragons. But simultaneously, I also have been wanting to make merch for a really long time, and I've had a bit of a conundrum in that I didn't want to just make t-shirts with pictures of my face on them and things like that. I really wanted to make products that I would want to buy and I would want to own, things that I think, if they weren't associated with the channel at all, would still have really great value. And also I'm quite concerned about the impact that creating merch has on the environment, so I didn't want to create a lot of trash that would just end up in landfill, contributing to a lot of the world's problems. So I think I found a nice middle ground, and I want to talk about both of those things during the course of this video. And this will begin a series where I talk about what it's like to play and what it's like to embody and roleplay certain classes, while I also make merchandise so you can wear those classes, essentially, where I make individual D&D class t-shirts. So with that bit of fluff out of the way, let's get started with today's video, and thanks for watching. Wizards are one of the three, or perhaps arguably four, most iconic classes and types of characters that have shaped not only Dungeons & Dragons, but almost all fantasy media since they were first introduced. Wizards have always been a part of the game, and alongside fighters, clerics, and potentially rogues, they're one of the most universally understandable and relatable types of characters that you can build. When you think of spellcaster, your first thought is usually to a wizard, and in-game, that's pretty much the case as well. Wizards are seen, usually in Dungeons & Dragons, by the townsfolk and other people who populate your Dungeons & Dragons campaign world, as either a terrifying threat, being able to disturb the natural order of things and manipulate reality around them as they see fit due to their magical prowess if you're in a low magic campaign, or if you're in a campaign where magic is more common. Wizards are the most respected spellcasters, with warlocks and sorcerers, as well as druids, being somewhat of a variation on the standard wizard idea. Wizards gain their immense magical power through arcane study, whereas a sorcerer is born with magical blood, allowing them to cast magic. A warlock takes the cheap and easy way out by bargaining something like their soul, or making a hideous and almost certainly one-sided pact with some creature of enormous power. Wizards can start as any person with the desire and aspiration to become powerful for whatever means. Wizards are therefore usually fairly old, because unlike a sorcerer who grows into their magical powers fairly quickly, or a warlock who can gain their magical powers instantaneously at any age whenever they choose to make this pact, a wizard is a kind of arcane scientist who has taken the time to not only study the magic that has been created by scholars who came before them, but also are intent on understanding why their magic works, and through that they can theorize how to create new spells and how to master almost any spell. This considerable amount of time studying in order to perform magic well, to truly harness the power of magic and use it for an exact purpose rather than just hoping for the best, can take whole lifetimes. And that's one of the reasons why our stereotypes of a wizard are usually seen as the sort of Gandalf-esque old man or old witch. Now, wizards will often practice illusory or cosmetic, perhaps alteration magics, to regain their appearance or their actual physical youth after they have studied this magic. But it's often seen in the wizarding community that to be old indicates their level of power and grants them a fairly significant level of respect among their peers. As well, it helps them to be underestimated if they look a little bit older. People are less likely to beat up the old man adventuring because they'll feel a little bit cruel, leaving themselves open to being blasted in the face with an assault of arcane fire that will render them to ash. And that's really handy because wizards are the class in Dungeons & Dragons with the lowest health pool. You are what they call glass cannons, people who can dish out massive amounts of damage and have absolutely the most utility of any class. You can do more than any other class by a huge margin. But you're one of the only classes in the game that has a d6 as your individual hit dice, which means the barbarian of the party is going to have roughly double your health every single level, and that's going to exponentially grow for them. And whereas you can play a combat wizard using touch spells and close range abilities to devastating effect, unless you really know what you're doing, that's not super advisable. And that's kind of the word of the day when it comes to wizards. In my opinion, wizards are not an ideal starting class for Dungeons & Dragons. You absolutely can, and you'll have great fun, but playing a wizard is probably best left for when you feel like you have a really good handle on the game, and you're willing to undertake a little bit of extra maintenance and note-taking. For that reason, I usually tend to tell a first-time player that a sorcerer is more what they expect a wizard to be, because you get to cast almost exactly as many spells, you get to manipulate magic, and so on, but you don't have the additional maintenance required. Being a wizard is absolutely immense fun, and I really hope I don't put you off this, but their main mechanic makes them a tiny bit more complicated than the other classes. Only just, but it's enough to potentially be a little bit daunting for new players. As well as being mindful of not wanting to get too close into combat with your low health pool and your lack of armor, wizards traditionally tend to wear just robes, and if you're wearing a type of armor that you're not proficient in, you can't cast spells in that armor. Just like every other spellcasting class, and most classes can cast some amount of spells, you learn a certain number of spells every time you level, and you start off with probably the largest number of spells of any class as a wizard, and you also have a number of spell slots, which improve as time goes on, representing your ability to cast spells of greater or lesser magnitudes, with cantrips being the easiest for you to cast, and first level and so on spells being slightly more difficult spells to cast. With most other classes, you can cast any of the spells that you choose when you level, so long as you have spell slots whenever you fancy it. With a wizard, that's not quite how it works. There are a certain number of spells that you've totally memorized, just like any other class, and you can perform whenever you want to. But the most complicated thing about a wizard, and also simultaneously its greatest feature, is its spellbook. Other spellcasting classes learn additional spells whenever they level up. When a wizard levels up, they get to add 2 spells of their choice to their spellbook. This is a tangible item that you can personalize and customize and add a huge amount of your flavor to your character whenever you choose to, however you choose to. 2 spells may not seem like much, and that's because that's not the real way that you're supposed to use a spellbook. You get 2 spells for sure, that's absolutely fine, and 2 spells every single level is definitely going to still give you a larger amount of interesting spells to cast than almost any other class. But a wizard's main feature is their ability to discover, create, and duplicate spells that they find in their adventures into their spellbook whenever they so choose. Now this takes time and money for materials, perhaps learning how to experiment with the spell using material components, finding an Eye of Newt and so on, will cost you a little bit of gold, and you're studying this. The nature of a wizard is to be precise and accurate and understand why a spell works, rather than simply using your emotions or feelings or simply hoping that magic will happen, like a sorcerer or a warlock might be. Spells of higher difficulties take longer to copy into your spellbook, but with this feature, you can be taught by your friends how they manage to cast spells, you can buy other spellbooks from nearby libraries or magic salespeople. You can steal them from the bad guy. You can steal the Lich's ancient spellbook and copy down all of their spells, or simply use their spellbook instead of your own. You can buy spell scrolls and save them and copy down the spells inside those. However you might find new spells, your quest becomes one of discovery if you choose to use this spellbook to its maximum potential, and so long as you take the time and have the gold to spend on the materials required to copy these things into your spellbook, you can learn a limitless number of spells, and you can do this whenever you want. You don't have to do it when you level up. So, unlike other classes, you don't have to wait until you level up to get more powerful, you just have to visit a library, which is so much fun and allows for a really great interaction between Dungeon Master and the player. It can be a two-way street. I often love it when my players will tell me that as a wizard, as a scientist of magic, they want to experiment with magic and create their own spells. We can negotiate between the two of us how this spell might operate, what kind of scene we might paint with them playing with these magics? Did they see someone else cast a spell and they're trying to figure out how they did it? Have they seen a friend cast a spell and they want to try and improve it? Do they know a spell and think that it has some limits and they really want to push through that? This is a great way to personalize your character, and together, the player and the DM can create spells together if they so choose. That's not something that every DM will allow, but written into the rules of your character at the very least is the ability to copy down spells that you have discovered that other people have researched. So long as you experiment and learn with it, you can put it in your spellbook. Where this gets complicated is the fact that you can only have enough material components, enough magic, or however you want to flavor it, to cast a certain number of those spells and be prepared and ready to cast those spells. Unlike a sorcerer, let's say, who has this magic within them that they can well up and cast any of their spells, or some of the divine spellcasters who can pray to their god for anything from their spell list. They don't even have to pick which spells they want to learn when they level up, they just learn all of them. You have to sit down at the beginning of each day and choose which ones of your spells you want to be what's called readied, what you want to prepare to be able to cast. That might mean that you know 100 spells by level 2, but you can only cast 5 of them in a day, and you have to pick in advance which 5 you might want to use. That might mean that you have the perfect spell to get you out of a situation, but you still won't be able to cast it in the moment. It requires a massive amount of forethought on your part in terms of what things you might encounter. From a role-playing perspective, this is fantastic, because going into a situation means that the wizard player has to be prepared and has to understand what's going on around them. They have to understand why they're embarking on a quest and what's likely to come up. They might want to research demons, for example, if they're heading into one of the 9 hells or the abyss, and find out what tactics demons and devils might be likely to use. From this, they might ascertain that some protection from good and evil spells might be something worth preparing for that day, whereas they normally wouldn't use that in their spell repertoire. So it requires a lot of research and actual effort on the part of the player rather than being spontaneous, which can detract from role-playing, or it can really enhance it. But hopefully you can see why I think this might be a little bit overwhelming for someone who's still learning the game, and why a sorcerer might be a more recommended class for a first-time playthrough. Additionally, your spellbook is a tangible, physical, and very, very flammable thing. You might spend years of in-game time and a fair few hours out of game writing spells in your spellbook, copying things down, and using all of your gold to do this. And a nearby rogue, an arcane pilferer, a street urchin, or something else might steal your book from you when you're not looking by pickpocketing you, and a villain could destroy it, and that means you're left with the very few spells that you've memorized and access to absolutely none of these spells that you've put in your spellbook. They're permanently destroyed. But wizards can make multiples of these spellbooks. They can create copies of their spellbooks just in case something bad happens, but again, that takes a huge amount of time, effort, and money. Additionally, as a student of the arcane arts, you get to do something that not many other classes get to, which is the ability of ritual casting. Rituals are a fantastic addition to Dungeons & Dragons, and they allow spellcasters to cast spells with a certain tag, i.e. their rituals, something that takes a long time to do. Perhaps it requires drawing an arcane circle on the ground with chalk or salt, gathering numerous ingredients, and so on, and performing a ritual that means that they can cast one of their spells without using a spell slot. The downside is that this can take 10 or more minutes to do, which means you're not going to be using this in the heat of battle. But if you wanted to set an alarm in your room, scry on someone from across the ocean or something like that, you could choose to do this as a ritual and still have all of your spell slots for the day. But just in case you do use too many of your spell slots, wizards are so knowledgeable about how magic works that they can perform something called an Arcane Recovery, allowing them to regain some of their spell slots and some of their ability to cast magic, even without taking a long rest. Something that is likely to make all of the other spellcasting classes incredibly jealous. Now, in terms of how this influenced my design here, I wanted to make sure that the spellbook was the key focus of this illustration. There are numerous subclasses and individual schools and specialisms that I'll get into at another time. I'm planning on making a series about the individual subclasses and how to play those. But the spellbook, outside of your subclass, is the most important thing for a wizard. The spellbook is the most iconic feature of this already incredibly iconic class, so I wanted to make sure that was front and center. I wanted to adorn this with wands, crystals, sparks of magic, and other spellcasting ingredients to give this some semblance of a busy and cluttered research desk that a wizard might have in their study. And in the centre, I wanted to have this eye of knowledge and numerous spellcasting circles, magical rings that may only mean something to the wizard casting it, but are indicative of their ritual casting ability. So hopefully this speaks to you as it did to me as representing wizards. I'm really happy with this design. Now importantly, I wanted to use this company T-Mill to make my shirts. Now, I'm not sponsored by them, but I am using them to create these products. Firstly because this is a print-on-demand service, and that means that there's no massive stockpiles of this stuff that's going to go to landfill if people don't buy enough of them. I think we produce a huge amount of waste as a society, and I'm really glad that this is not going to be that. On that end, this material is usually recycled, and in the first place is made out of cotton and plastic-free packaging, and renewable energy is used throughout the entire process. They use organically farmed cotton and avoid toxic pesticides while growing this cotton. Any waste seeds are pressed into cakes, which are then sold as organic cow feed. The waste that the cows produce is used as fertilizer for the cotton trees. They use recirculated water, which is cleaned and filtered, and it's rainwater to begin with, and they boast that the water is clean enough to drink. They're Global Organic Textile Standard certified, which means, thankfully, this is not being made in a sweatshop, and have passed their Social Accountability International audit. So everyone in this chain should be earning a living wage and not suffering to make these products. They personally own a solar farm to power their manufacturing operations, and their factory in India uses wind farms. Their packaging is recyclable and plastic-free, so I don't even feel bad about shipping it to you guys. And if you wear out your t-shirt absolutely to death, because I mean it's organic cotton, and I know this sounds like I'm doing an advert, I really swear I'm not trying to sound like every advert in existence, but it's very soft, it's organic cotton, and because there's nothing weird in it, there's no funky chemicals, there's no plastics and so on, you can send the t-shirt back to the company, they'll grind it down and recycle the cotton into new t-shirts and things. So there's no part of this process that I'm not proud of. I'm really proud of the design that I came up with. I'm really happy to offer products that I would actually want to buy, something that I think is fun and interesting. It's not just a picture of my face, and it's environmentally sound. So if you guys enjoyed this, I'm going to be making more of these. I've already asked my patrons over on Patreon which class they're most excited to see next, so I can already start working on that. But in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll make sure to leave a link down below to where you can purchase this t-shirt if you would like it. Now hopefully you can see I'm actually wearing this t-shirt today. I ordered a sample of that. I'll zoom out the camera so you can see. But yeah, here we are. This is my studio, for those of you who have not seen it. But yeah, I'm wearing this very t-shirt with the wizard design. We've got the kind of spellbook here, and some arcane sigils, some wands, and some crystals and stuff all over the place. And yeah, it's held up pretty well. I've had it for a while now. It's been through a wash. I went out and did some gardening in it just to kind of give it a bit of a test, to kind of see, sometimes these screen prints and things might crack and crumble and stuff, and I found largely no, it seems to be intact and as good as the day I got it. So I'm really impressed with this, and I'm so pleased to tangibly have like a piece of something that I've made. I'm really proud of this, and if you guys enjoy it, I will, like I said, I'll leave a link in the description box to where you can get it. Otherwise, you can find these tees on my website under the merch section. It should take you straight to where these t-shirts are. And they're available in all sorts of different colours. And I might put them on other products as well. So far just t-shirts, but maybe hoodies and things like that. If you guys let me know if that's something that you would like. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me. And I hope you enjoyed learning about wizards and watching this drawing unfold. Until next time, happy monster hunting, and see you later.